Our whole thing is, your body will whisper to you, and when you ignore the signals, it'll start shouting at the form of disease. So really, being able to clue into how your body feels. And now Brandy and I both, I think I speak for you, Brandy, we both kind of get to the point now with food, lifestyle, diet, all these things, we can know when we're out of balance, and we're able to kind of go, oh, it was that I did too much, or okay, maybe I overindulged in some wine on the weekend. Whatever it is, we can see the correlation, in our body. Welcome back to Fab Fertile TV, and today we're going to be talking about food sensitivity testing. So we're going to be talking just a general overview. For a more in-depth discussion, definitely check out the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, episode 21, and we dig into a lot more details. So today we'll talk about the general outlines about a food sensitivity test. So I guess it's for a food sensitivity, I would say the majority of people that come to us, we say do you have a food sensitivity? They all say no. They say they're eating a clean diet. They don't have a food sensitivity. When we do the testing, we find the majority of people actually do. So really, why is this important for fertility, Brandy?
Well, I think the first thing is when we say food sensitivity, people think allergy, and they're two totally different things. So an allergy is something like a peanut allergy, where you get like hives or anaphylactic shock or something like that. Whereas a food sensitivity, it's not as severe, so you won't get like that immediate response, where you may get a delayed response. So that might be something like you eat a food, and then an hour later, a day later, 3 days later, you start getting things, maybe a headache, maybe a brain fog, maybe digestive upset, maybe skin. Some of those things can be things that would be associated with a food sensitivity. And so many of the people that we work with, like you said, when we run a food sensitivity test, they are sensitive to some foods. And we found, surprisingly, when they take those foods out that they are sensitive to, it can actually have a pretty huge impact on the body. So if you're eating foods that your body's sensitive to all the time, then it's actually creating a stress response in the body. It's a stressor. And as we talk about in all of the things that we do, stress has a big impact on our body. It has an impact on fertility. When your body's constantly under stress, your body's just worrying about dealing with the stress rather than worrying about fertility and your cycle and producing adequate hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like the bread you have on Friday will not give you the headaches until Monday or Tuesday, or whatever it is, the pizza or the dairy that you have on Friday. So typically people never really connect the dots. It's like 3 to 4 days later. Oh, I usually start the week off with a headache. My digestion's off. Meanwhile, it was like, oh, on the weekend I was doing this. So it's really, our whole thing is, your body will whisper to you, and when you ignore the signals, it'll start shouting at the form of disease. So really, being able to clue into how your body feels. And now Brandy and I both, I think I speak for you, Brandy, we both kind of get to the point now with food, lifestyle, diet, all these things, we can know when we're out of balance, and we're able to kind of go, oh, it was that I did too much, or okay, maybe I overindulged in some wine on the weekend. Whatever it is, we can see the correlation, in our body.
Right. And one of the things I think that happens too in our society, we're so busy, go all the time, that we've lost that ability to check in with our bodies and see what it's telling us. So when we do food sensitivity testing with our clients, we also have them do a food journal. And the food journal has a series of questionnaires that makes you stop and really tune into your body and ask yourself some questions that you probably have never asked before. And so a lot of the nagging symptoms that you've had, you've never really realized that those weren't actually normal, and that maybe they were associated with the foods you're eating. So the way we do it, it helps you to tune into your body. And so you get to the point, like you just said, Sarah, where if you have something going on, you will know, I can pretty much tell what it was that caused that issue. Like I accidentally had too much cheese, or, I didn't have enough sleep, or whatever it is. I tune with my body enough now to know when I have an issue, it's usually I know what it is, because I've learned to listen to my body and to my symptoms.
Yeah, and that food diet checklist that we give our clients, so the food diary, is really, it's more, do I feel satiated after I eat? Do I feel irritable? I remember for years I had this like irritability where I was like cranky. And turns out, yeah, for me, it was a food sensitivity. And as I, healed my gut and took out these food sensitivities, turns out I'm not this irritable person that people thought I would. Not people, my husband, he's probably like, what? But yeah, so it's really being able to clue in to how you feel, and using that sheet as just one of the tools that we use. So I guess as far as the food sensitivity testing goes, typically for our couples coaching program, our favorite test is the LEAP MRT. Now that test is not available everywhere. So if that one's not available in your location, we like the IgG test. So these kits are all drop shipped internationally. We work with clients all over the world. It comes to your house. For the LEAP MRT, you would be doing a blood draw at a local clinic, at a local blood draw center, or the IgG is a finger stick. Some people, if they have to do a finger stick on their finger, they want to pass out. So you can still take that to a local blood draw. But really, we're lucky that we're in 2018. This stuff is really accessible, and we can ship it, right to your door. So Brandy's the expert on testing. So anything you wanted to say about the LEAP MRT, Brandy?
Yeah, I mean, just testing in general, there is no perfect food sensitivity test. I mean, I just want to say that up front, because you will read a lot of things and people say, well, there's a lot of things on the internet saying that they're not super accurate. And in a way, that is true. I mean, ideally, the best food sensitivity test would be a complete elimination diet, but it's very tedious. It takes a lot of time. You have to be really committed. And for those people who just want to get a snapshot and get an idea of what they're sensitive to and see it on paper, like tangible results, a food sensitivity is the way to go. And so the reason that we like the MRT is, rather than just looking at one thing like IgG, so IgG is a delayed reaction, like antibodies being a delayed reaction. Your immune system is not reacting right away, but it's reacting a couple hours to a couple days later. The MRT, the way that they do it is they actually take your blood, they introduce the proteins of the food to your blood, and then they look at your blood under a microscope and they observe changes in your cells. And so if there is a dramatic change in your cells, then that indicates to them that there's an immune response. So MRT stands for mediator release test, and that's essentially what it is. They're looking at your blood under a microscope to observe changes. And that's why we like that one, because it's better at catching things rather than just looking at one type of reaction like an IgG.
Yeah, and it's got a 95% efficacy, so it's got some really good ratings. Yeah, and then as far as the IgG, so that's typically 98 foods, whereas the as far as I know, the LEAP MRT will look at 150 foods and food chemicals.
It's actually 170 now, so they recently updated it. So it's 170, and yeah, the IgG is usually 96 to 98 foods. So, I mean, it is more limited. They generally will check the most common foods, which is the most common foods people are going to be eating on a regular basis. And like I said, there's no perfect test, but it's still pretty valuable.
Yeah, so that takes a couple weeks for the test. So basically, it's drop shipped to your house. You do the test, and you send it off to the lab. We get the results, and then we'll get the results in probably 2 to 3 weeks. And then while we're waiting for the results, we have people do the elimination diet, and you can check out episode 25 for the elimination diet, and that we go into a lot of detail on that. But basically, briefly, it is you're taking out dairy, gluten, soy, corn, peanuts, and eggs over the course of 10 days, and then you systematically reintroduce them. You got people that bring back in corn, they may feel it flares up their asthma. Bring back in dairy, they could feel phlegmy. Bring back in gluten, they may feel brain fog, digestive issues. So it's different for everyone, and so then it's really to keep those foods out for 30 days, and then when we get the results of the food sensitivity test, that's when we would then tweak the diet even further. And so with the food sensitivity test, typically we're getting a report saying to take the food out for either 30, 60, 90 days. Maybe Randy, you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of on a scale of green, yellow, red. So kind of like a stoplight. So green is go, which means, if you have foods that come back into green, those are good for you. Yellow is yield. So those are going to be foods that you're moderately sensitive to. And those will be the ones that we will take out for minimum of 30 days, but ideally if you can do it 60 days, and then red is stop. So those are the foods that you're very reactive to, and we like you to take those out for at least 90 days. because it's going to take that amount of time to kind of allow your immune system to calm down that stress response, and even calm down some of the inflammation that these foods can be causing in the body.
Yeah, and a lot of times we'll have back, people get a food sensitivity test, they'll come back and they're intolerant to their favorite foods, which then can be a clue potentially there's leaky gut going on. There could be other things going on in the gut. So that is a place where there's gut healing to go on, and it does take a little bit of time, but eventually you can reintroduce those foods.
Yeah, for sure. And so I always like to use an analogy that I heard from Dr. Tom O'Brien about the concept of the gut being a cheesecloth. So if you look at a cheesecloth, it's got very, very tiny holes that allows very small particles to pass through, and that's what we want. So when your food is digesting through the gut, you want those small nutrients passing through the gut wall and getting into your system so that you can use them for the processes. The problem happens when you begin to have a leaky gut. It's like taking a pen or a knife and poking really big holes in that cheesecloth. And so when that happens, you're going to get larger particles of food going through the gut wall, and then your immune system thinks that those are foreign invaders. And so they're going to mount a response, like it's the army coming to attack it. And that's when you start to get a sensitivity. And so we often see people, like you said, Sarah, who come back to with sensitivities to some of their favorite foods, and it's because they're eating of them on a very regular basis. They likely have a situation where they have leaky gut, and so their immune system is mounting a response to those favorite foods. And they could be very healthy foods like lettuce and vegetables and fruits. And so the key there is for us to dig deeper, which we do. We don't just stop at a food sensitivity test. We remove them to calm down the immune system, and then we do a lot of gut healing work to kind of heal that leaky gut so those larger particles of food aren't passing through, and that in turn will help them be able to bring those food back into their diet. And the key with their diet is not to eat the same foods day in and day out, but have a lot of variety, which, you always hear people talking about variation in your diet is important.
Yeah, and that's because a lot of it, we're creatures of habit. I like to think of myself as spontaneous, but it turns out I was having an avocado every day for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And then, yeah, I had a food sensitivity test when I had leaky gut and gut infections, and the avocado came back as sensitive. And, we have the same, well, what else? It was like an apple every day. So even so these seemingly healthy foods, that's when people are like, oh, what's the best diet for fertility? Well, there is, because obviously there's an optimum diet where you have, your fats and protein, but really it's the best diet for you, because right now you could have a whole bunch of gut things going on, leaky gut, and maybe all these healthy foods that you're bringing in are not good for you. And your body's like, mounting, an immune response. And then, your body wants to survive. It doesn't want to procreate.
Right. I mean, the greatest example, how many times do we see somebody come back sensitive to turmeric? I mean, it's a big thing. People are using turmeric all the time. It's very good. It's anti-inflammatory, but a lot of people are coming back sensitive to it because of the situation with the leaky gut. And so even some of the best foods like pineapple, which, people tell you to consume pineapple part of your cycle to increase cervical mucus. And, people are coming back sensitive to that because they're eating too much of it and they have a leaky gut. So it's a really good tool to give us some insight. And like I said, it's temporary. It's not permanent. It doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to eat these foods again, but it just takes some time, some patience, and some healing.
Yeah. So it's 30, 60, 90 days, looking at the food sensitivity test, and then doing the gut healing along with it, because you could take the foods out, but if you're not healing the gut, if you've got gut infections, you're not going to get that result that you're looking for. So it is a combination of all of it. And so for the 30, 60, and then, so if someone is at 90, so the food is like really high red, sometimes you may not be able to bring that one back in until a lot longer.
So generally the things that, to be honest, there are a very small handful of things that I don't ever recommend bringing in and keeping out long term. So things like wheat and gluten, that's generally something where I don't ever really recommend bringing that in. Dairy is another big one. People are so sensitive to dairy. The only difference with dairy is that people tend to be able to bring back in something like a butter or a ghee at 90 days, because there's not many people that are reactive to the fat, and that's essentially what it is, milk fat. It's when you start getting into like the protein powders and the yogurts and the milks where there's lactose and casein. Those are the most allergenic parts, or the parts of the milk proteins that people are sensitive to. So you are right. There are some foods that even after 90 days, you may not want to bring in, especially if it's something like dairy or wheat. But if it's a vegetable, you're going to do that reintroduction process. You're going to do the same thing, and you may find you can never have it. Like the example I just said of pineapple. Pineapple was a red for me, and I still can't have it. And I've done a lot of gut healing. It's just one of those foods that I'm just not going to be able to have. And that's fine. There's a lot of other alternatives out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just keeping that variety and seeing what works for you. And when you bring it back in, same thing again, using that food diary or journal to document how you feel. Are you feeling bloated, gassy? Are you feeling, how's your mood? Are you feeling satiated? Are you feeling starving? So like those different markers where we don't necessarily correlate some of those things to food.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, so really, as I say, definitely check out episode 21. We go into detail about the different food sensitivity tests and the pros and cons of each one. If you're looking to do a food sensitivity test, you can definitely contact us and we'll give you more details on that. This is part of our couples coaching program where we start with couples out by doing the food sensitivity. We have them do a Dutch test. Definitely check out episode, I think it's number 33 with Dr. Carrie Jones, where we talk about the Dutch test and the hormone levels that we look at, looking at sex hormones and your melatonin and cortisol. And then also we do a stool test. So you can book a free call and we can chat to see if this testing is right for you. So anyway, until next time.